Life's experiences can often humble us, can't they? They can be quite hurtful, bring us down to earth with a bump, and yet with God's mercy and help we can learn from those experiences, we can grow from them. But they can be painful, they can be difficult, and often they're difficult because we've been full of our own self-importance. In our psalm today, Psalm 131, just a short little psalm of 3 verses, it seems a personal testimony of King David's life, and what an incredible life he had. One of mighty highs and yet some real lows. And David, it seems as though he's later on in his life and he's describing what he is and what he's become. He goes in verse 1 and describes that his heart is not proud. He's saying that because he recognizes that his heart probably had been proud on a number of occasions. It was very difficult perhaps for King David not to be proud because of all the incredible victories, achievements that he went through. And yet there were then times that he goes on to take matters into his own hands, none more so than with Bathsheba. His heart is proud, he seems to be above reproach. There's an incident with Nabal and Abigail, and again he seems to overreact, and God mercifully uses Abigail to point out his error, and his response being not what it should be. He should be leaning on God and trusting in him to vindicate him instead. But we see this throughout the whole of the Bible. So often, many of God's people are proud. We look at the disciples. 3 years they spent with Jesus, learning at the feet of the Master. And yet even towards the end of their 3 years, they're still at times full of their own self-importance. We can look at them and tut and just think, how on earth? And yet they're lessons of our own hearts at times. How much we do think of ourselves when we should realise that we're to be stripped of all pride. We're to come humbly to God and recognise that all we have is found in him, and so we trust him alone. David speaks in verse 2 about being a child weaned from its mother. And he's saying, I'm content that that's happened because I've moved on, I've matured. I've realised that I need to grow up. I need to depend on who? I need to depend on you, Lord, for all things. Because this is how he finishes verse 3. Israel, it's a plea not just for himself, but for the whole of his nation. Put your hope in the Lord, both now and forevermore. Oh, let's learn this lesson. Let's strip ourselves of pride. Let's come humbly to God. And let's trust him for absolutely everything. Why?